The key trends that relate to the Sudanese conflict include widespread civilian casualties and displacement, with over 8 million, as part of the latest reports from the UN, have been displaced internally and across the borders. And tens of thousands have actually lost their lives. Another key trend that is seen in the Sudanese conflict is that targeted attacks and ethnic violence is present, such as targeting of the Masalit tribe and community in Darfur, West Darfur, particularly Jenaina. There is also high presence of sexual and gender-based violence that is seen in this conflict, particularly in areas that are under RSF control. And then when such things happen, victims often don't have access to justice or medical care. There is also total collapse of governance and essential services, as well as shrinking civil space and attacks on human rights defenders, as well as humanitarian defenders, humanitarian providers, apologies. And we've also that there has been a use of siege and starvation tactics between the warring parties, where humanitarian aid is not allowed to enter regions controlled by RSF, and then sometimes in the areas of the controlled by SAF. So this is just the background, right, of what's happening. I have a couple of panelists with me. We have two joining in person, and then we have two that will be joining us online. Let me start with the panelists that I have present here. On my left, we have Majid Maali. Okay. He works with Sudan. He's a Sudan country coordinator at Defend Defenders, and he will also focus on the issue of the justice system in Sudan, particularly the denial of fair and public hearings, trial guarantees, as well as prolonged pre-detention periods. And maybe you can also touch down on the fact that a lot of civilians who have been accused of being aligned, let's say, with RSF, have been prosecuted and killed without going through the system, right? On my right, we have Mohammed Abakar. He's a researcher at Awafi, and he will talk to us about the patterns of torture, enforced disappearance, and the targeting of civil society as humanitarian providers in Sudan. Online, I have Mus'ab Subhi. He's executive office member of Emergency Lawyers. He will address the extrajudicial killings, the massacres, as well as forced disappearance and arbitrary arrest of lawyers and human rights defenders. And lastly, but not least, we have Eva Nood. She works with she's a human rights lawyer, and she will discuss and give us a brief of what's happening with the ICJ case that Sudan has before the ICJ against UAE, as well as the use of universal jurisdiction and the importance of documentation. We apologize for starting late. We have had some technical issues. Then let me just lay down the ground rules. Each speaker will have 10 minutes. We will reserve 15 minutes for questions and discussion in the room. So let's start with Subhi. Please take the floor. You are muted, Mus'ab. Can you unmute?
Good. Hello, May. How are you?
I'm doing well. We can hear you loud and clear. Please begin your presentation.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I am happy to be here and I think I thank the community for justice for giving me this chance to speak about the human rights situation in Sudan. During the conflict that started on April 15, 2023, between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Force. This war caused terrible suffering for civilians across the country. In this speech, I will talk about three serious, three serious and connected issues: extrajudicial killing, arbitrary detention of lawyer and human rights defenders, and forced displacement. I will start in extrajudicial killing. Since the war began, killing outside the law have increased in a shocking way. Civilians are being killed by both the Sudanese Armed Forces and Rapid Support Forces in the three main ways. Number one, when civilians try to stop looting or theft. And number two, when they are suspected of helping one side in the war. And last, when they are targeted based on their race or ethnicity. Thousands of people have been killed in Khartoum, Al Jazeera, Sinnar, White Nile, Darfur, and Kordofan. They were killed by bullets, bombs, or heavy weapons. These people were killed without any trial or legal process. In some places, bodies were found in the streets or in mass graves. Some showed signs of torture. Even aid workers, human rights defenders, and medical staff were killed. Sometimes after being kidnapped or during random check-ins. The worst part is that no real investigation are happening for these crimes. Second, arbitrary detention of lawyer and human rights defenders. Lawyer and human rights defenders in Sudan are now direct targets of repression. This is because they document violation and help victims to get justice. In the past years, many were arrested without any reason. For example, our colleagues Muntasir Abdullah, who faces charges that could mean life in person, and Riyad Abdullah and Fadl Al-Khatim were all arrested without any reason. Today, some were kidnapped, beaten, and held in secret places. The arrests are illegal. Most happen without judge orders, and we are based on fields cases of helping the other side in the war. Today, we urgently need legal protection for human rights defenders in Sudan. War must not be used to criminalize their work. I want also to speak about the three main button in the war in the Sudan, the forced displacement. The war caused one of the worst displacement crises in the world today. More than 12 million people have been forced to leave their homes inside and outside Sudan. This is not because of fighting, just. In many cases, civilians were directly targeted. Their homes were bombed, they were robbed, or women were attacked. Women and girls suffer the most during displacement, whether inside Sudan or near the border. There is not enough humanitarian help. People have lost their homes, documents, and their communities. What is happening in the Sudan, not just local crisis, it is human rights disaster that needs urgent global attention. Extrajudicial and arbitrary arrested and forced displacement are three sides of the collapse, but there are still hope. Through joint work by activities, fact teams, and local and international organizations to respond in this crisis. I am thank you to listen me. I am ready to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mus'ab. We will definitely circle back to you for your recommendations on an actionable, some sort of like targeted intervention that can take place from civil society perspective as well as from the SHPR. I'll give the floor now to Mohammed Abakar. He's a researcher at Awafi, and he will speak to us on the patterns of torture, enforced disappearance, and the targeted attacks against civil society personnel as well as humanitarian providers. Thank you.
Hello, everyone here, and thank you, Committee for Justice, for having me today to speak behalf on Awafi to this panel. And thank you, moderator, and our member of these panels. Behalf on, based on our reports, research studies recently published, we published it on attacks on healthcare and torture violations against civilians. And recently we conducted to result a report on attacks on violations, torture against civilians in Darfur particularly. And I'm going to emphasize that
Hello, can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you so much. We apologize for the technical difficulties. I guess it always happens at the first time. Thank you. I really wish that I would have been able to hear the other two speakers speak about the situation in Sudan. But I'm sorry I couldn't. So let me just jump into my presentation, and then I'm very much looking forward to having the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Committee for Justice for this opportunity, and I would like to commend the speakers for raising such important issues on what is going on in Sudan, including the lack of access to basic services and high level of human rights violations, among others. I would also like to applaud all the human rights defenders working in Sudan under very difficult security situations. I would like to speak about the localization of justice and using the African countries and regional mechanisms to provide opportunities for victims to seek justice and reparations. But before I delve into this topic, I would like to commence by discussing documentation and its importance in the context of Sudan and mass atrocities. Correct documentation and evidence are essential for the victims to obtain justice and reparation for their violations. The purpose of the documentation is to make it impossible for the perpetrators to deny the crime and the impunity for these heinous violations and prevent future violations. Where documentations of human rights violations is successfully carried out, the evidence collected can be used to put pressure on the respective governments to carry out prompt, impartial, and thorough investigation, as well as provide reparations to the victims of torture and other violations. Impunity, as we heard, has been rampant in Sudan. The decades of war and authoritarian regimes left behind thousands of victims and violations. Until today, most of the victims are suffering silently. The impunity breeds grounds for more violations, and the cycle of violations just continue. Sudan is, however, not the only country that has been addressing the violations and end the impunity. There are states that have been successful in addressing the impunity, that have relied on the political will and regional and international pressure and victims' pressure to succeed. I will now delve into a few examples from the continent. But before I do, I'd like to start about the current case at the International Court of Justice. The case was filed by Sudan requesting provisional measures against the UAE. Then I will discuss a little bit Habré trial and Sierra Leone Tribunal before discussing the potential for the universal jurisdiction cases in Africa. Earlier this year, the government of Sudan filed a claim at the International Court of Justice against the United Arab Emirates, accusing them of complicity in the genocide against the Masalit community in Darfur by supporting the RSF via providing weapons and ammunition, among others. The court held a hearing to decide if it has the jurisdiction to hear the case on April 10. And this Monday, the court will deliver the orders on the request for the indication of provisional measures. The entire hearing was focused on whether the court has a jurisdiction to hear the case. Sudan government argued that the reservation by the UAE to the Genocide Convention does not affect the court's prima facie jurisdiction. And even if such a reservation was accepted, it's incompatible with the object and the purpose of the treaty. However, the UAE asserted that the court lacks the jurisdiction considering the existing jurisprudence, and further court does not have the jurisprudence since the basis of jurisdiction is subject to a clearly formulated, notified, and properly registered valid reservation. So on Monday, the court will decide if they can hear the case, and if Sudanese government is successful, it will move into the discussion about the provisional measures similar to the case of South Africa versus Israel. Let me now talk about two tribunals on the continent. One is Sierra Leone Tribunal, and the other is the Habré trial that have successfully prosecuted and found perpetrators guilty of severe human rights violation. First, the Special Court for Sierra Leone was a judicial body set up by the government of Sierra Leone and the United Nations to prosecute perpetrators who bear the greatest responsibility for serious violations of international humanitarian law committed in Sierra Leone during the Civil War. On 12 June 2000, the Sierra Leonean president wrote a letter to the United Nations Secretary General asking him and the international community to try those responsible for crimes during the conflict. The Special Court has jurisdiction over crimes against humanity, violations of the Geneva Conventions, and resulted in 8 convictions, including one of Charles Taylor, the former president of Liberia. On February 8, 2013, not that far long ago, the African Union and the Senegalese government set up the Extraordinary African Chambers. This chamber had 4 investigating judges that indicted Habré, the former president of Chad, for crimes against humanity, torture, and war crimes. And on February 13, 2015, after a 19-month investigation, the judges found sufficient evidence for Habré to face charges of crimes against humanity and torture, and as we all know, he was eventually convicted. Finally, I'd like to touch on the principle of universal jurisdiction. In the past few years, we have seen the Western countries prosecuting perpetrators from third countries residing in Europe or the United States. In particular, you guys are in Gambia, so I will use Gambia as an example. The Gambian victims have been quite successful in seeking justice abroad. On May 15, 2004, a Swiss court found the Jammeh Interior Minister, Ousmane Sonko, guilty for his role in crimes against humanity relating to torture, illegal detention, and unlawful killing, and sentenced him to 20 years in prison. More recently, last month, on April 15, a Colorado jury convicted a Gambian national, Michael Sankorea, on torture charges for participation in torture of numerous victims in the Gambia in 2006, including through beating and flesh burning, because of the victims' purported involvement in a plot against the then Gambian president. In addition to the Gambia, victims from the Democratic Republic of Congo have been seeking justice in France. While the trial is yet to commence, on 6 November 2023, 3 French judges indicted former Congolese warlord Roger Lumbala Tsenga for his alleged complicity in and conspiracy to commit crimes against humanity, including murder, torture, and rape, including slavery in the Democratic Republic of Congo. While these trials have taken place in the Western countries, there are several African countries that have laws allowing for prosecution of perpetrators from other countries. Among those countries are Kenya, South Africa, Uganda, and Mauritius, to name a few. All these countries are also parties to the International Criminal Court and have laws allowing for the prosecution of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. Further, South Africa has been playing a bigger role in the context of accountability recently by filing a claim against Israel to stop the genocide in Gaza at the International Court of Justice. In 2010, in Kenya, the International Commission of Justice filed a claim with the Kenyan court to ask for the arrest of President al-Bashir of Sudan if he entered Kenya. A claim was successful, and the arrest warrant was issued, the ICJ arguing that Kenya has an obligation to arrest him should he set foot on its territory. However, as we know, the Kenyan government refused to arrest him. So what are the lessons from these efforts? First, well, not every effort can yield the result, but it can lead to the disruption of the officials' lives, restricting their travel for the fear of arrest, and making them the pariah of the international community. Omar Bashir stopped traveling to countries in which he knew he was likely to face the arrest. Second, solidarity with like-minded civil society organizations in African countries that have laws to prosecute the heinous crimes, and these perpetrators can be found in these countries. I spend most of my time in Kenya, and Kenya is one of them. Collective pressure on the regional bodies like the AU to set up accountability mechanisms for Sudan. And finally, the African countries that have the laws and structure to obtain justice for the victims of atrocities can learn lessons from Sierra Leone or the Gambia, how to end the cycle of immunity. While we are talking about accountability, it's important to know that political will and accountability goes hand in hand. In the past, the African leaders or elders came together to negotiate peace and urge the states to carry out accountability measures. Without these pressures from the international and regional community and people and the victims on the ground, accountability often falls aside and the impunity continues to flourish. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, and thanks for the panelist. I have a small question regarding the case that the Sudan against the UAE at the ICJ case now. My question is for the panelists, all of them, if it's possible, or Sudanese human rights defender colleagues, how they see this case and the opportunity to the Sudanese civil society to engage in such kind of cases. This is something we need to understand it, and I think you are the one who could give us an answering regarding it, because we feel I don't know, but till now the reaction is coming from the civil society in Sudan regarding this case is not what we think. There is some reason, say, or there is some answering, say, this something is between the army and the RSF, and it's not something between the Sudanese victims and the perpetrators, and the others, it's something is politically, it's a political case, it's not a human rights case. There is a lot of answering this, but if you could help us to understand this case and how the civil society sees, and this will help us a lot to understand the situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, May, and the panelists as well, for the rest of the colleagues whom they are joining us online. I have a comment as well. Maybe it's sounds to be a question as well regarding the humanitarian situation, particularly in Darfur or in Al Fashir, the capital of the North Darfur. As you may know that after the RSF took over the Zamzam IDP camps, where most of the people there start fluid from Al Fashir to Tawila. That's mean there is a huge gap in terms of the foods, water, and generally the humanitarian assistance. Where we are feel that there is the role of the organization that still very lack, such as international organization or the national organization as well, where this should be highlighted as the most of the children's as well the women's now they're suffering a lot. So I feel that there is a really needs in terms of the advocacy efforts, where this is the main role for the Sudanese civil society before the regional organization as well, the mechanism. The second thing is related to the recently development in the Kordofan in a Nuhut city, where 2 days ago RSF controlled the capital of the I think West Kordofan. Yeah, West Kordofan, Nuhut. And we are receiving a lot of informations from different channels that there is a different type of violations are committed against civilians. That mean as organization we're supposed to take an action, because if you see now there's no people talking about what's happening in North Kordofan particularly. There is that there is a lack of information from the ground and so on, but that's not mean to stop talking about what's happening there. In generally, we're supposed to highlight the situation there, since there is a lot of civilians are dying. Yesterday, I was talking to Majid, and he was telling us that his the brother of his father was killed there, and now he's unable to communicate even with his father, who is still inside the Nuhut. So we still receiving this terrible information from such areas. And here I would like to emphasize that the civil society as well, the regional mechanism, such as AU and the African Commission, should to take action regarding what's happening in Sudan. Lastly, I would like also to highlight the impacts of the cut of the US fund on the civil society organization working. As you've seen here, there is not enough organization, no enough people.
Thank you so much. It seems as if with this mic, the online participants are able to hear us. Yeah. If only we knew. Okay. So you have a question? Okay. All right. So we will conclude with you, and then I'll give the floor to the panelists.
So my question is for you, Mai, and thank you for your intervention and moderation. Do you think that Sudanese women, and do you still believe that Sudanese women who are victims of this war can one day access to justice through international mechanisms, especially on the cases of sexual aggression and rapes?
All right, thank you so much for the engagement. I'll give the floor first to Eva, who will just give us a bit of a reflection around the question asked by Mifrah around the ICJ case, and what about the the available opportunities for civil society to engage in the case, and how best it can be utilized, because again we do have a al-Bashir case is still ongoing before the ICJ, but what can we do different, in terms of engagement, and also the fact that a lot of civilians view it as a political case as opposed to a human rights case, since it's being led by the de facto government of Sudan, and Sudanese civilians who are the victims of these human rights violations have not really been consulted, in preparation of the case. So Eva, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So let me just make sure that the al-Bashir case that you have referred to is in front of the International Criminal Court, not in front of the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice is a fifth organ, permanent organ of the United Nations, and it has its seats in the Hague. And it is a forum for states to litigate disputes. That's why Sudanese government had to file it against the UAE. I completely agree that it is a political in some way, but it also sets a lot of important precedents. And we've seen it in regards to the Gaza case, we've seen it in regards to the Myanmar case, we've seen it in regards to the Congo case and Rwanda, we've seen it when the court found Serbia responsible for the genocide in Srebrenica. So yes, while it's a dispute between the two states, I would argue that it's also an opportunity to present and gather the evidence and use the opportunity for advocacy to put pressure on other members of the United Nations to do something about, particularly in this case, interventions of the UAE. As we also know, the Serbian government recently filed a claim to support the UAE. So there are political and opportunities to pressure the other governments to stop the sales of the guns. But there is also a question of, once this moves to the next proceedings, they will be looking more and more into the evidence of human rights violations, and that will be presented. So while this is opportunity to engage with it, because it's a court between two countries, it does not allow necessarily for the opportunities of the civil society or organizations to engage directly. But I do think that there are opportunities to use the verdict and use the proceedings to pressure the governments of other countries to put more pressure on the UAE and stop the sales of the guns and ammunition. I also see it as an important opportunity, honestly, to start to use the documentation already available. We've seen in the first hearing that they have been referring to a lot of civil society organizations reports. They've been referring to the UN reports, highlighting the genocidal content or genocidal behavior of RSF against the Masalit community. So I think that in general, yes, I can agree that it is a really very, very difficult situation the Sudanese victims are in, because the government has not consulted them, but they don't necessarily have to. But I look at it as, at the current stage of the war, I feel like any opportunity to advocate or speak about this horrendous suffering of the Sudanese victim is an opportunity that we can use to promote and engage in the discussions and hopefully find some solutions.
Thank you so much. I wonder if any of the other panelists have some. Oh yeah.
Thank you. I just want to comment about the point Ahmed mentioned, the ICJ case. Yes, it is a political case 100%. It's a Sudan government versus UAE, government. About the civil society engagement in this case, as May mentioned, no one actually consulted us about this case, and everyone knows that the Sudan de facto government is not genuine about, protecting its own, civilian actually, So if they are genuine, Bashir is somewhere moving, so they could easily handed Bashir before the ICC if they are really genuine about, justice and accountability. So it's 100% a political case. Let them, if they are genuine again, let them do their homework, fix the justice system at domestic level, and then talk about, no one can deny the fact. Actually, everyone in this globe knows that Emirate is sponsoring RSF, So let us actually do our homework internally before even go outside and, calling out, Thank you.
So much. I think your contribution was more of a reflection, not a question that's directed to any panelist, and we thank you for that. The last question that was asked by Fatma with regards to the victims of sexual violence in Sudan and whether they have any access to justice at all. I think the unfortunate answer is that at the current moment, they don't have access to justice because just as Majid on my left has alluded that the infrastructure for the justice system has completely collapsed in the areas that are affected by the war. Most of the victims, the ones that are privileged enough, quote unquote, are able to seek medical assistance from hospitals that are partially running, for example, in Khartoum. And as far as I know, some of the organizations that are working on supporting the humanitarian efforts have been working towards providing Plan B pills for victims of sexual violence, just to at least prevent any pregnancies that might result from incidents of rape. The second part is that most of the times when these incidents happen by soldiers, let's say RSF soldiers, they are not identifiable. They are unable to point out that this person did this to me, which is quite unfortunate. And then also there's also the social aspect to it. Issues of rape, sexual violence, or anything sexual really is considered a taboo. So even if you're a victim, speaking about it and approaching any sort of legal assistance might also put you in trouble unless you have the backing of, like your community, your family, etc. So far, the efforts to document these kind of incidents have just been from civil society organizations that are still functional in Sudan, as well as organizations that work within the region, but they have a focus on Sudan, such as the SIHA network. They have been, sharing statistics of cases of victims. But most of the times when victims approach them to speak, they speak anonymously. So it's quite unfortunate, really. Do you have anything to add at this point?
Maybe one final thing, I think there is high need for support for the Sudanese civil society and human rights defenders inside Sudan who are documenting atrocities in both RSF and SAF control areas. They face very difficult situation with little actually help. They are in front and they face all these challenges of killing, arrest, detention, sexual assault for women human rights defenders. So I just want to call for solidarity, but also support for those who are in Darfur and in other parts of Sudan, working in this condition and bringing out, what is happening in Sudan.
All right, thank you so much. This brings us to the end of our side event. We reiterate our appreciations to Committee for Justice for hosting this event and really providing us with a platform to speak about what's happening in Sudan. We don't take it lightly, and you have been consistent about it. So we really appreciate it. The second thing is to thank our panelists on the podium, as well as the ones joining online. Thank you for sharing the insights and basically highlighting the specific issues that Sudanese are facing in the ongoing war. And lastly, thank you, our participants online and in the hall for sticking through. And we apologize once again for the technical issues that we have faced. And lastly, if you want to be updated with what's happening in Northern Africa, and about Sudan, I would just recommend that you follow Committee for Justice socials. They have been, providing updates and reports about what's happening in Sudan, Egypt, Tunisia, Northern Africa, and the Sahel region as well. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.